All right, so what provoked the council, I've already shared. But what I think might get lost is in Messianic Jewish circles, we tend to focus on the disconnection that happens between Easter and Passover at the Council of Nicaea. This was not the main issue at the council. Yes, there was a desire to disconnect what they would have called Pascha from Passover, but it was not the main motivation to convene the council. It was about the Arian controversy and who Yeshua was, who Jesus is. And so I'm going to try to stick to the word Pascha for closer historical accuracy. Pascha is from the Greek word Pascha, so you just kind of add the chai pronunciation, which is based on the Aramaic word that pretty much sounds the same, which is based on the Hebrew word Pesach, which we're all familiar with. Pascha is only referred to as Easter in Germanic languages and did not start being referred to as Easter until centuries later. So there's even some very late, like 1500s, German and English dictionaries and books where it uses Easter and Pascha like interchangeably. And so you will see some English translations of ancient texts that I quote, where I will read the word Easter, but the Greek word behind it is Pascha or Pascha. And so the languages, but then even today, Christians whose language are based on Latin or Greek use a version of Pascha today. They don't call it Easter, but they call that Pascha, which is very close to the Hebrew basis of that, Pesach. And so just to quickly address another myth, I think, is that just because Easter sounds like Ishtar, a Greek goddess in the ancient world, it does not mean it was meant to embody a pagan goddess in the name. So just because it's called Easter, it doesn't mean it's a pagan holiday. Just because it sounds somewhat like Ishtar. After all, Esther sounds even more like Ishtar. But that doesn't mean Esther is based off of Ishtar either, which some people actually try to make that case based off of the same logic as people use it for Easter. Others say Easter is based on the pagan goddess Hostera, but we only have one record of this goddess in all our historical records. So scholars tend to think that Hostera was likely made up, or the author was confused about it. It was mentioned by I think 8th or 9th century Christian author. So Easter came to be in Germanic languages because Pascha occurred in the 4th month of the Old English calendar. I'm going to not pronounce this very well, but Ostormanoth. And so over the evolution of language, that turned, and as it evolved also through English, that turned into Easter. So it was just the month that Pascha was occurring on the Old English calendar. So Easter is not pagan, especially the name. If that interests you, there's a really good, this is just one of the videos that he does, but he has a really good series on this. It's Inspiring Philosophy. He's on YouTube. He does a really good job looking at primary sources and reading that. Yeah, go ahead and snap a picture if you're curious about it. So then also we actually have the privilege of having Inspiring Philosophy on Two Messianic Jews to talk about Christmas, where he does a really good job of explaining how Christmas is not pagan either. Not even the origins of Christmas are pagan. So he does a really good job with that, and he also has his own series on his channel talking about Christmas as well. So I recommend both of those series. All right, so this disconnection of Pascha from Passover. Until about 190 CE, some Christians in the East commemorated Yeshua's crucifixion on Nisan 14, so in accordance with the Jewish calendar. These people were called Quartodecimans, which meant the 14ers. And the West commemorated, so the West being the Roman Catholics, the West commemorated Yeshua's resurrection on the Sunday after Nisan 14, so still in accordance with the Jewish calendar. But then around 190 CE, the East and the West united on celebrating Pascha on the Sunday after Nisan 14. So they still depended on the Jewish calendar, and this Constantine did not like. So let's take a look at some letters that he wrote after the council regarding his attitude towards this former connection with the Jewish calendar. So this is Emperor Constantine's letter to all churches concerning the date of Pascha, and is based off of some ancient sources where we are able to reconstruct his letter. It says, "At the council we also considered the issue of our holiest day, Easter, Pascha, and it was determined by common consent that everyone everywhere should celebrate it on one and the same day. And in the first place, it seemed very unworthy for us to keep this most sacred feast, following the custom of the Jews, a people who have soiled their hands in a most terrible outrage, and have thus polluted their souls and are now deservedly blind." It's a very harsh language. He goes on to say, "Since we have cast aside their way of calculating the date of the festival, we can ensure that future generations can celebrate this observance at the more accurate time, which we have kept from the first day of the Passion until the present time. Therefore, have nothing in common with that most hostile people, the Jews. We have received another way from the Savior. In our holy religion, we have set before us a course which is both valid and accurate. Let us unanimously pursue this. Let us, most honored brothers, withdraw ourselves from that detestable association." So later on in the letter, he claims that Jewish people ridicule Christians for having to rely on them to calculate the date for their holiest day of the year. So at least the way Constantine portrayed it in very harsh and unnecessary terms is that because the Jewish people ridiculed them, they had to separate from this, and he ratcheted the rhetoric way up in intense disrespect. So while that was Constantine's attitude, we don't have record, as far as I'm aware, of this attitude being part of the council's decision to disconnect the two. From what I saw, which admittedly was limited, the official synodal letter, again, I don't know the pronunciation really of that term, but a synod is a council of a Christian denomination, and it's essentially an assembly or a meeting. And this is from the 6th paragraph of a 7-paragraph letter written after the council. And it says, "We further proclaim to you the good news of the agreement concerning the Holy Easter, that this particular also has, through your prayers, been rightly settled, so that all our brethren in the East who formerly followed the custom of the Jews are henceforth to celebrate the said most sacred feast of Easter at the same time with the Romans, and yourselves and all those who have observed Easter from the beginning." So the rhetoric is absent in this letter, which is good, but it is hard to say what the attitude was of the bishops at the council. But from what I found, this is how they chose to state it. So to give a little bit more detail into the result, one scholar summarizes it in this way. So pretty much instead of observing it in accordance with Nisan 14, this is what they decided. It says, "The full moon, which coincided with or fell next after the vernal equinox of the spring equinox, officially replaced Nisan 14 as the critical temporal reference point immediately preceding Easter Sunday. The Nicene resolution regarding the date of Easter was accepted in AD 341 as the first canon of the Synod of Antioch, and any Christian who thereupon did not accept it was automatically excommunicated. Quartodecimanism came to be defined as a strictly Jewish custom. It is within this spirit that Christian theologians would later claim that the observance of Nisan 14 did not oblige Christians, since it was essentially a Jewish custom." So essentially, what was decided is that on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, the church would celebrate Pascha, or Easter. And then today, the Western Easter is in accordance to that, but then the Orthodox Easter, or the Greek Orthodox Easter, is the first Sunday after Passover, after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox, per the Julian calendar. So the the Eastern Orthodox or the Greek Orthodox Church follows the Julian calendar, and the Roman Catholic Church follows the Gregorian. So if you have a Roman Catholic friend and a Greek Orthodox friend, they tend to celebrate Pascha or Easter about a month apart for that reason. All right, so where this ruling was right was that non-Jews have no inherent obligation to celebrate anything on Nisan 14 or 16. That is true. Where this ruling was wrong is that the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, is not the more accurate date of Yeshua's death and resurrection. It would have been Nisan 16, most likely. But I think that's okay. And I think it's okay because, like I said before, there's no commandment to have an annual church-wide celebration of Yeshua's death and resurrection on Nisan 14 or 16, so it's not like the church is neglecting to do something that they are commanded to do. And it is possible to have a genuine, heartfelt celebration of an event any day of the year, even if it is not exactly on the date of the commemorated event. And so we see this in the Bible itself. So Pesach Sheni, so the second Passover, we read in Exodus that if anybody was unclean during the time of the Passover celebration in Nisan, they had the opportunity to celebrate it a month later in the month of Iyar. So it wouldn't have been taking place on exactly the same day, but it was still a valid and genuine celebration and commemoration of the Exodus. And in fact, Jewish people are to remember the Exodus every day. And so most days, the Jewish people are commemorating the Exodus, a very significant event, not on the day that it actually occurred, which is okay. And then also on Shavuot, it's Jewish tradition to celebrate God giving the Torah, which is an amazing moment in the history of the world and especially the history of Israel. But there's no biblical data saying which day of the calendar this happened. So traditional Jews will rely on tradition found in the Talmud, but there's no biblical evidence for the day that they choose. But yet we celebrate God giving the Torah on Shavuot, and that's a good thing. It's worth celebrating. And then also Sunday does make good symbolic and biblical sense to celebrate the resurrection. We know when we read the Gospels that the tomb was discovered empty on the first day of the week, which is Sunday. And so while we have here at, and also in the Messianic Jewish community at large, no formal community-wide celebration of the resurrection on a Sunday, which is the day of the week Yeshua rose from the dead, we do celebrate the resurrection on Nisan 16, so the day on the calendar when it occurred. But I think in this way, we and the church actually complement each other really well. We do it on the calendar day that the resurrection occurred, and they do it on the day of the week that the resurrection occurred. I think both make sense. I think both are okay. And so my take further is if the various church denominations decide to change their tradition and celebrate Yeshua's crucifixion and resurrection on Nisan 14 or 16, Nisan 14 being the day of the crucifixion, then that would be really remarkable. But otherwise, I'm not bothered by their traditions, even if Constantine or the bishops did not have good motives in originally separating the two. However, I do recognize that is easy for me to say now in a world with Messianic Judaism, where Jewish followers of Yeshua are able to express our Jewishness and faith in Yeshua simultaneously. This was a tragic moment in history for countless Jewish followers of Yeshua throughout the centuries afterwards. So I definitely recognize that.